All right, my name is Heather George. Welcome, everybody. I'm co-director of the National Center on PBIS. I also am a professor at the University of South Florida and have been with the National Center since 2001. So if you were listening to what Lucille had presented, we had gotten funded for the first time in 1998. I came in year 3 for our first round of funding. Some logistics I wanted to go over with you. And first of all, some of you probably saw me walk in with a mask. I want you to know I'm not standing here, and I know we're in tight quarters for the next 75 minutes. I am no longer contagious, I've been told, but I am paranoid of getting anything else. So just know that if you do want to come up and talk to me, it's perfectly fine to do that, but I'm not contagious, at least so I've been told. So, all right. When you are thinking, how many of you, well, I'll ask you that question and another question in a minute. I want you to think, this is the start of a 3-part strand that we're going through today. And I want you to think about these 4 questions because everything that we do is founded under that team process. Although sometimes when we're trying to get things going with PBIS the first time, we're going to feel like we are the sole person on the island. But I want you to think about, based on where you're coming from, what I talk about today and what's talked about in the next 2 sessions is how does this compare to our priorities that are happening right now? What team would oversee this work? What should we stop doing to make room for this work? And that's going to be critically important because we know our plates are full. And in order for us to do something well, we need to be able to have the time to be able to do it. And how will we assess whether it's A, implemented well and it's working? Essentially, is it making the impact that we were hoping it was making? So I want you to think about that. All right, so again, you're here. We're going to talk about the implementation blueprint. Brian, who happens to be here to make sure that I'm doing my job, is that he will be talking the second one on the essential elements. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty about PBIS. He gets to do that. But then the third session is going to be colleagues of mine that are going to be sharing with you great exemplars of what it looks like in the school, the challenges, the successes they've had, and you can pick their brains through all of that. And so this whole process is about getting started with PBIS with really focusing initially on that Tier 1 aspect. As we know, setting up that foundation is critical for everything else to work that we bring to our schools, our classrooms, our districts, overall. So the 3 objectives I'm going to talk to you about is essentially the why, the what, and the how. I want to give you a little bit of the background. Lucille set you guys up nicely about the evidence base around PBIS, but I want you guys to understand the amount of work that goes into the leadership teams and the type of functions they need to engage in to make this work, and it really is a team-based process. But then become familiar with the implementation blueprint, and essentially that's going to be majority of this session. As you know, you found out we just received our 6th round of 5-year funding. So October 1st officially kicked off our 26th year of funding, and so we're pretty excited about that. If you're not familiar with our national site, you go to pbis.org. And everything that I'm going to be sharing with you today is all already up there on this site. Everything that is up there is free and paid for by the United States Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, and Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. I have to make sure to notice the sponsors there in the process. Oh, I also failed to mention, I'm also here with our project officer from the Office of Special Education Programs, Mito Solomon, and so he's here monitoring me to make sure that I do not say anything inappropriate. But if you have any complaints about what's happening in the federal government, he's the one to talk to. And if you have any great things to say about the center, he's also the one to share that information with. So, all right. So one of the things I want you to think about is if you're not as familiar with the site, we are always uploading it, updating it with new information. So you can go to the top of it and you click on PBIS and you can scroll down and you can see that there's lots of different information. So what is PBIS? How do I implement it or why implement it, getting started, and then what the basic information about the tiers. It's perfectly fine to go ahead and take screenshots of this, use this stuff, and if you're going back to your school and saying, hey, this is something we need to do, we put this up there, it's a public domain. We want you to use the information. Topics. You can see here all the different topics that we have available. From what I'm talking about today is essentially around that school-wide piece, and also district and state. A lot of this information could fall under there as well. Publications, if you wanted to know anything that's happening, you can go straight to the publications, and you can always see the new stuff that we've been uploading up there, which tends to happen on a weekly basis. But we've got briefs for policymakers, ebooks, evaluation briefs, practice guides. Again, all of that is free. And if all else fails and you don't know where to go, which inside information, all of the partners on our center do this often. Me is one of them. Go to the search button and type in what you're looking for, and it will pull it from everything across the site. Tools. All right. When you go to the tools section, I'm going to work backwards on this one. We're going to talk specifically in the blueprint section. Okay, so today is specific around the implementation blueprint. So what I'd like to know from you is how many of you work primarily as educators or instructional staff with students and their families? Please raise your hand. Okay. How about as school administrators? Please raise your hand. Ooh, that's a lot. Y'all are enjoying your day today, huh? At the district level. Okay. At the state level. Nice. And did I miss anybody? Anybody not fall in those categories? At the regional. Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm super excited that you guys are all here. I'm surprised that there's that many of the school administrators here. Sometimes there's a lot more of the teachers. So good news, as school administrators, you are getting this firsthand knowledge information. So pressure will be on to make sure that you will be able to do all these things in this wheel by the time you leave at the end of the day of the strand. We will test you tomorrow morning on your knowledge of that. All right, so Lucille also talked to you this morning, like I said, about the outcomes and if we implement PBIS with fidelity. It's not just a matter of starting with a good idea. It's a matter we've even tested it out over and over again with the research. We continue to improve the science around this, and then we've continued to learn in our work in the schools across the country and internationally of what makes the difference. And what we've been finding is overall our randomized control trials are seeing when you implement PBIS as it was intended, also known as implementing with fidelity, these are the types of outcomes the research is proving. So some folks may say, I did PBIS, it didn't work. The question always was, did you do it as it was intended? Okay, and that's the tough part. Have you guys been able to look on the app to see that all the handouts are there? Woohoo! All right, that's great. I did not change anything since they were uploaded, so just know that. The other thing I want to warn you about, the slides that are up there, they're all hyperlinked too. So everything that I talk about, you'll be able to click on that icon and it will take you to that resource. So in Florida, we've been collecting data. I've been down there since 2001. And one of the things I wanted to know is when I was going out across Florida, for the first time, I'd have administrators they'd go to training, they would do the work, but they would then start to say, this is kind of a lot of work, I'm okay. And they would start to have that implementation slip. And then their results were okay. And I'd say to them, you know what? I want to know the difference. If you implement with fidelity, do you have better outcomes? So going back 20 years ago, I'm only showing you 10 years worth, but I've got another 10 years I could add to it. We were the first state to ever start looking at that and start talking about that. Because honestly, what I wanted to say is I was tired of telling administrators.
Sorry, I can't find the slide. They're on the app, but they're not on the website.
Oh, they're on the app. Okay, so they're on the app, so they must not have been moved over to the website yet. Yeah, great clarifying. But I'll make sure that it does get moved over to the website. But as long as it's on the app, you should be good. Thank you. All right, so what I wanted to do is to know, we had not been looking at this yet for fidelity. Do we have outcomes? Because if you go back 20 years ago, we maybe had, I don't even think 500 schools across the country, maybe 300 at best. We were just starting for the first time. So what we found overall is if you look at that top one here, it's what's the median rate of office discipline referrals per 100 students per day. So that accounts for the variation of student enrollment across the board. And overall, if you implement with high fidelity, meaning getting a 70% or higher, we use the benchmarks equality. That was what was used and still used down in Florida, which 70% could also equate for the TFI as well. But 31% lower office discipline referral rates across years if you implement with high fidelity. And that's the key that I needed to know. Because that's the piece where you go back and talk to the administrators and you would say, how much time are you spending on one office discipline referral? How many minutes are being lost in instructional time? If you're able to gain back 30% of that time, what does that equate to in the amount of instructional minutes you've just regained? And I have to tell you, sometimes that's years for schools when you actually put it that way. All right, average rate of out-of-school suspensions per 100 students implemented with high fidelity, 63% lower rate in the 21-22 year, and 21% lower across all years, the past 10 years that we're doing. And this has been consistent even from the previous decade that we had before. So this information can be located on our annual report. But what's important to know is on the PBIS.org website, we also have other states and some of their annual reports that you can pull from too. I'm telling you this now because if you're interested in getting this going and want to get district support, if you're the school administrator and you want to get support from your district, you can go to that and see these sites, show that as examples and say, listen, these are data elsewhere of where it's working. This is why I want to do this at my school. So what is it that we need? We need to have a vision. We need to have a vision of what we want to do, what we want all of our students to become. We've got to think about establishing this foundation that provides that safe and healthy and organized environment that's conducive to support all the students and to support the adults. We need to provide access and build opportunities for everyone. We need data to guide our informed problem solving, to understand that well-being is absolutely essential to everyone's success. We need a diverse team-based approach that uses the equity lens, and we need to be willing to do things differently. And honestly, that's going to be the hardest part, isn't it? Yes. So our federal government, U.S. Department of Education in January had released, as you'd heard from Valerie Williams, our OSEP director, about raising the bar. And if you wanted to know more information, you can click on this. You can click on the different links with it. It will take you straight to there. But you can see there's achieving academic excellence, boldly improve learning conditions, creating pathways for global engagement. Where PBIS falls within that is so much of this, boldly improving learning conditions. But there's also the piece of achieving academic excellence because we want all students to be able to succeed, especially students with disabilities or those at risk for being identified with disabilities or being excluded. In March, came out with the 5 guiding principles. And of these 5 guiding principles, first thing, fostering a sense of belonging. That's the environment that we've got to talk about. Supporting the social, emotional, physical, and mental health needs of students. Supporting high quality teaching, recruiting and retaining, because we want you to stay in the profession. And treating students with dignity and respect. All falls aligned with PBIS. And from there, our Title IV Part A center, we had worked with them along with several other centers on various tip sheets and taking this further, and this just came out at the end of May. So strategies for school and district leaders, strategies for schools to enhance relationships with families, strategies for educators and school-based staff, and strategies for student-teacher support teams. You can click straight on this. It will take you there, all free resources. All right, so let's talk about this PBIS framework, because without a framework, my colleague Don Kincaid with me down at University of South Florida, he came up with this slide one day. Was pretty proud of himself because he usually doesn't do that stuff. And you know, it stayed with us, and now all of us use it and abuse it. But it is really a great analogy, and if you don't have a bicycle frame, the rest of the stuff is completely useless. It's not going to get you from point A to point B. And so that's the piece to think about, is what is that framework? We've got to have a framework, because how we're going to decorate that framework, the various practices that we're using, how we're using those practices, is going to be specific to the needs of your environment. All right, so that multi-tiered approach. This is talked about in the PBIS implementation blueprint. Just giving you a heads up, whenever you see that icon, this is taken straight from the blueprint. This multi-tiered approach. So how many of you actually have some type of MTSS or RTI for academics happening on your school campuses? Okay, which is good to see, because it used to be in the day you would just see a few. So what I want you to think about is, if some of you are more familiar on the academic side of things and the whole thought of like, oh, behavior, this is different and all that, I want you to understand it's the same processes that we're going through. When we're talking about checking for understanding and progress monitoring and teaching specific skills so kids are able to read, we're doing the same thing with behavior. Okay, we're checking for understanding. So there's a communication collaboration process. Data-based problem solving. We're still engaging in that universal comprehensive screening. There's evidence-based practices. We need to make sure it's fitting the culture and contextual relevance. What we do in elementary schools is not the same of what we probably should do in high schools, right? Yes, in high school, teams usually get pretty offended if they see something that's way too cute, elementary level, right? Yes. So we've got to make sure that it absolutely fits. We've also got to make sure that it fits the community too. So content expertise, and you've got to have a team that's overall leading it. So what is PBIS? It's that evidence-based multi-tiered framework. It is evidence-based. It is multi-tiered. It is focusing on the social, the emotional part of it, and the mental health and well-being, in hopes to improve, have better opportunities for academic success. So it's about creating this whole school approach that creates the positive, the predictable, the safe learning environments. How we're going to do that is start with Tier 1. That's for everybody. And I want to make sure that you guys understand everybody. It's not just all the students. It's all the staff. It's all the teachers. All the administrators. It's even all your bus drivers, your cafeteria folks too. Remember, the bus is an extension of the school day. Whether you like it or not, whether you're excited when they get on and they leave and you're like, goodbye for the day, it's still not officially over till they have gotten off the bus. So when we're talking about all, it also means it's not all those who are just willing to do it. It means we are embracing all. We are expecting this of all. We are supporting all. But we know that some people need a little bit more support. And it's not just kids who need that. There are adults too. There are classroom teachers that need a little bit more support. Some of it, not necessarily their fault. Could be that they have all cousins in their classroom, right? Could be that they are the farthest away, back portable, with all the kids with the most problem behaviors. Maybe they don't have support staff. So we've got to think about, how do we provide supports? This is for this whole school approach. So some need additional supports. It doesn't mean they don't get access to Tier 1. It means they get additional support on top of that Tier 1. But then some need a little bit more, and maybe the most intense. Adults fall in that category too. You know, think about having a baby. You're going to need a lot of support then, right? Having meals come to the house is great. Having somebody take the baby so you can take a nap is great. Does that last forever? No, it doesn't. Okay, because you're able to get your sleep again and you don't need as much intensive support. So you've got to think about, this is hopefully few. If it feels like everybody's in this category, that means our Tier 1 needs to be seriously boosted in a big way. All right, so here we are with the multi-tiered framework. It describes, you know, the big definitions around it. All of what we do is through this continuous improvement process. Some people refer to it as a problem-solving process. There's a 4-step, there's an 8-step process. There's also a dance. I understand about that too. I am not going to dance, nor will I sing. either for you guys like Lucille did. But this 4-step problem-solving process, or continuous improvement process, it's not just focusing on what's not working, meaning the problem. It's also looking at what is working, because that's the kind of stuff you want to be able to keep doing. So when you start to engage in PBIS, the part you need to understand is chances are there's probably lots of stuff that you're doing that is working, but it might not be in an organized fashion, or you might realize you're spending so much time on the things that aren't working well, are not giving you the impact that you want, that you don't realize all of the other stuff that you are doing well. And so that's the piece we've got to think about. Step 1 is looking at what's happening. And that's a matter of the positives and the negatives. You always want to have that balanced, okay? The second step is then moving into why is this happening? Focusing on the positives and the negative part of it. What are we going to do about it to keep the positive that are working going? And what are we going to do about it to address these negative areas? And then, is our plan working? All right, this is one way. Is anybody from Australia in here? I know there are a couple folks from Queensland that came. This is from my colleagues in Queensland. And I was over there and having a discussion with them about what are essential elements that Brian's going to spend the whole second session talking to you guys about. They took this away from it, and I thought this was such a great descriptor of that. And if you liked it, they've even got even cooler things, but you can click right there and see what they created. But essentially, you're looking at, when we're talking about data systems practices, is like, how are we doing it? Or let's start with, is what we are doing working? How are we doing it? That's changing the system. And then what is it that we are doing? That's the practices. That's the evidence-based interventions. So we use our data to start the work. We arrange our system, which means the adults give them the support to do the work. And then we bring in evidence-based practices to impact the kids. And we go back and say, did it work, by looking at the data? And we keep adjusting the other two areas. Essentially, the goal is to work smarter in this process. All right, so building capacity across the implementation cascade. So you guys, we've got representation across all of here and region, so you're not completely left out. But you got to think about, regardless of where you're coming from into intersecting with PBIS, that we all are connected in this process, because in the end, say if you're a district level or up here at the school, the work you're doing, if we're not making an impact here, what are we doing? Okay, we've completely wasted our time. So another way to look at it is this onion approach of how we're all layered overall. All right, now it gets to the functions of leadership teams. So Lucille had showed you this. You'll probably see this often over the next 2 days. But this is essentially how we've organized what leadership teams need to be focusing on. And so, like I said, Brian might be going over this in more detail the next session. But for leadership teaming, there's executive functions, which deal with the blue boxes up here. Executive is like, how do we get funding to do this? How does this impact policy that we're having? How do we build our workforce so that they've got the skills to implement this? And what kind of partners do we need to bring on board? Or who are we basically need to disseminate our information to? But there's also implementation functions of teams. Get people trained. It's the professional development. Make sure that there's technical assistance and coaching them in how to do the work within the classrooms. And then they're evaluating to see, are they making the difference? And hopefully disseminating that to the partners so that can impact your funding and start to continue to build your workforce. And you become a model demonstration for others to come and see what has worked, what hasn't worked. They hear about your challenges. It's hugely important information. The PBIS implementation blueprint talks you through this. All right, so regardless of where you're coming from, what locale, leadership teams need to deal with this overall. Does this mean you have to do all of it? Maybe. Does it mean If you're a district, yes, you should be looking at all these buckets, but maybe you have subcommittees addressing some of the particular areas. Again, the blueprint will talk you through this whole thing. So let me get into the blueprint. If you click right on that picture, it will take you straight to it. But the blueprint is going to focus on, again, it's not just for schools, not just for district level, not just for state, even if you're a classroom teacher, to help you on relying on teams to guide systems implementation. So if you are a classroom teacher, you don't have a team yet, it doesn't mean the information isn't going to be beneficial. What it means, it's going to give you all the information that you need to gather, who you need to start pulling together or to get around the table, to start building that team. If you already have a team, which I'm sure all of us already have teams set up, you need to look at, are we fully meeting the need here? Is it clear what our functions are for folks that are on the team? And again, Brian will talk more about that in the second session. Using that continuum of evidence-based practices to support the student needs, using data to identify the strengths that are working but uncover the other needs that are occurring and monitor progress. We've got to regularly check, are our practices working? Engage the students, the families, and community members. That's your partner engagement piece. Because essentially, if your teachers aren't on board with this, they're your number one partners. Your students and your families are your next round of partners on that. And then you obviously need to get the district folks, school board on that, and your community members. And developing the content expertise, and at some point, maybe even coaching each other in the process. So let's talk about this implementation journey. Are there questions so far? Okay. So I usually when I come up with some of the terms, I like going back to just straight, what are the basic definitions out of Webster, the dictionary for that. But a journey is a series of experiences or events, is a single episode or process that spans a period. Yes?
I have a question. What do you suggest to a charter school that's a part of a 3 charter school system and there's not equality amongst all 3 with regards to budget?
I think part of it is, are you at one charter school, or are you kind of over all of the charter schools?
I'm at 1 charter school. PBIS facility.
So part of what you'd have to think about is that, do you have folks on board that they want to do this at your school? And then figuring out, can we do this? And then talking to your overall organization of the 3. Doesn't mean the other 2 have to get on board, but at some point they may. It may become something that the organization says, we want all of our charter schools to do this. So, and you would have to talk to them about that. Yeah, again, the goal is about working smarter in this process. So it might be just repurposing the folks that you've already got on your campus and determining what's working and what's not working, and let go of the stuff that's not working well. So, all right, the synonym for journey. It's an adventure. Some of you might be like, why is she going through this? Because you are going to need to remind yourself you're on an adventure when times get tough. The antonym, if you don't get on this journey, you're remaining, you're settling, you're stationary, just conclude it altogether. Does that seem pretty lame? Right. So ideally, you don't want to be doing that. So the adjectives overall for journey I thought were pretty interesting. Adventurous, transformative, we heard that this morning. Challenging, inspiring, unexpected. Enlightening, because you're going to learn things along the way that you didn't realize, but in the end, fulfilling. It's not going to be an easy process, but it's not an impossible process. All right, so how many of you have started your first year, full year of implementation? Raise your hand. Raise it high, like you've just kicked it off, or you're like just starting it. I saw some hands go down, so that, not quite sure what that means. You guys are thinking of kicking it off, but not officially yet. Or we kicked it off, but it wasn't a great kickoff.
I was going to say it's been running for many years, but
It's a little flatline?
yeah.
Okay.
Time for a reboot.
It happens, and it happens to everybody, okay? Doesn't matter where you are. Been implementing for at least 5 years. Oh, and you're in here. Awesome. Oh, a couple hands. That's great. Been implementing for up to 10 years. Oh, okay, nice. How about more than 10 years? Oh, it's so awesome that you're in here. Okay. How about you then think about the journey you want to phone a friend? Yay. Totally fair, totally fair. All right, so how do we do this? This is my son at sleepaway camp in North Carolina. And I was clearly not in North Carolina at the time when I was voyeuring the campsite to see what pictures of Hayden can I see today. And how did I know this was him? Because he was wearing his Seattle Seahawks socks to match his sweatshirt, and I had just mailed those to him a few weeks earlier. And I was like, good God, please tell me he did not fall off the cliff and he's holding on for dear life. So without context, it's a bit scary for a mom. So we need to know how he got there, okay? And we need to know how he got down. But he made it home and wanted to go back to camp, so we'll take that as good data, right? All right, so in the blueprint, I talked to you. We talk about in that blueprint the evidence-based features for it. It gives you the hyperlinks, how to get there. It talks about the continuum, the triangle, and what that all means across the various tiers. It talks about that continuous improvement process. It talks about the essential elements and what those all mean within the PBIS framework. It also talks about the implementation cascade. It talks about leadership team functions, and there's a lot of information in there about leadership team functions. It talks about a simplified implementation process, helping you figure out where are you in the process. Are you getting ready? Are you getting started? Or are you getting better? And this is going to change depending on what you're doing and where you are within that continuum of support. So some of you might be getting ready for the very first time for Tier 1 training. But as you've gotten good at implementing, you move into getting started. But then you start moving to getting better. And then at some point you're like, you know what? We've got some kids that need some more advanced tiered support. What do we need to do to get ready for that professional development and set that system up? And then you're going to get better at that, and you're going to evaluate. And then sometimes 10 years down the road, you realize, you know what? We need to get back on board. What is it that we need to do to get ready or get started? And it's that cyclical process, not linear, which means it never ends, essentially. It's not a death sentence. I look at it as it's always going to be challenging and adventurous. That's why you need those adjectives to remind you along the way. In the implementation blueprint, there's a table, which I know that's extremely small font. Don't worry, you can go straight to the app. You'll be able to go straight to the blueprint to see it directly. So let's get into the blueprint. So the blueprint, this was the fourth edition of it. I led the revision of it this round. And the blueprint was always intended to help folks know what's important, what to do, and how to kind of somewhat evaluate and also develop an action plan to guide you in doing the work. In no way did we want to make sure that it was prescriptive, because as you know about the PBIS framework, it is not a program, it is not a curriculum package. So that's the piece that developing the blueprint, it can get tricky because you always need to make sure to be able to talk across all environments and all people at those times, but you need to be able to give them the specific tools. So if a classroom teacher said, okay, how do I do this exact thing in my classroom now? And that's what the blueprint, this version will help guide you through that. So it's intended, it's going to have that team-based approach. And again, you don't have the team together yet. It's okay. It's going to give you those skills for that. But essentially, it's describing all the background and the functions of a leadership team. And then it's going to share the specific resources for you so that you'll be able to deliver and implement with fidelity. The intended users are folks like you, okay? Those that are interested in exploring and getting ready. Those that are interested in continuing what they're doing are those that are interested in getting better at what they've been doing. And this, we're talking about all folks fall into this category here. We have even family members at times that will take this information. We work with the other family centers and they're like, this is so great. I'm going to take this to my school and I want to show them this is what I want them to do for my kid. Pathway to resources. You know, we produce an awful lot of stuff across the 25 years for the National Center, and trying to organize all of it for somebody who's new coming to the process and trying to manage a classroom, manage a school, manage many schools across a district or state. How do you organize that information? And so the blueprint this time, we've set it up so that across contexts, so your organizational level, whether you're state, district, or school, across also locales, whether you're urban, rural, or suburban, geographic region or territories, and as well as for communities, across a variety of topics too. So at times it will start to get into some more detail, or it will help give you the resources where to go for some more detail on that. The various sections. The first one talks about the background, essential elements, the history of the center, what our values are as a center, and implementation science. The second section's organized by those key leadership team functions and spends majority of the time in section 2. Section 3 are all the various references we've used, and section 4 is a glossary of terms. And again, I'm going to be talking to you mainly about section 2 today. So what that might look like, am I going through this kind of fast? I might be. Do we have any questions so far? Yes.
Is the blueprint, the actual hard copy of the blueprint going to be available to purchase here at all? I mean, I know we have the technology piece, we have it on the app, we can access it, but I'm the kind of person that likes to have a book with a highlighter to go through. Is it available to purchase at all?
Well, one thing is, it is not available to purchase because everything that we provide from the center is free. So just know that. 2, we are not going to be printing it because it is filled with hyperlinks everywhere. And so, I'm trying to see, did that get into that? Yes, I didn't spend enough time on that. So I'm going to show you where all the hyperlinks and why we wouldn't want to print it. Because the minute you print it, chances are it could get outdated at that point. Or you're not ever going to be able to access the links to it. You know, you have to be careful of it in that we didn't want to create an encyclopedia or essentially like a Bible and people are like carrying around this big heavy thing and then it's just going to keep bigger and bigger and bigger. We've got to figure out what is this main message, how would this address everybody, and then how do we link them to those specific resources based on where they're coming from and help them guide their journey, essentially. Yeah, but if you wanted to print it out, you certainly could. It's about 70 pages, so in color, so you might want to print it on somebody else's printer. So maybe someone you don't like that much. So. All right, so if you went to one of the pages here, so this is starting, this is leftover resources from the previous section. So at the end of each section, there's always going to be a green box that says resources that will have the list of hyperlinks in there. The beauty of that is that's going to take you straight to the resources on our website. Those will always be the ones that are the most updated on there. Okay, because at times we might see like, oh, there was a spelling error, or oh, we've gotten more sophisticated with this particular area, so we update the brief for that resource. But if you were here, you click on it, it's always going to take you to that most updated version. Sometimes it's going to be taking you straight to the website because the website page has all the additional information on there. Again, we don't want to be duplicating and trying to keep it manageable, but yet still relevant for all of you too. So here you can see it starts. What are the executive functions? So when you're starting this new category for leadership teaming, it'll say you are here. And so this section is then going to talk about the top 4 buckets that I refer to, or the blue boxes as we want to call it. It's going to give you background information about it. So the first one is partner engagement. It's going to tie it to that icon. So you always understand when you see these things what they mean. We'll go through the background information, describing it. May give you additional guiding questions, additional information, additional call-out boxes. For example, in the leadership team section itself, it will go through a whole box on here's all various roles of team members. Here are the types of people that are typically on teams that are addressing PBIS. And then you've got your resources specific for partner engagement. Does that make sense? All right. Here's another one. This one's starting with funding and alignment. Again, we're dealing still with the executive functions. The blue box is at the top. You can see it's going through the background here. It's giving some additional information in a separate box here. It's also going to go into, for example, how to align teams and committees. And then you've got your resources specific for that. Questions? All right, here's another one. Now we're down in the implementation functions. You can see the box is green now, right? So it'll help you understand where you are in that overall picture. So we've got the topic of coaching, sometimes referred to as technical assistance. So for the topic of coaching, here you can see there's types of coaching structures. Because again, there's not one right way. We are not going to program it. We are not a program. You've got to figure out what is a way that works. And it might be that you guys already have great teaming structures already on your campus. It might be you already have great coaching structures on campus. You don't want to reinvent, nor do you want to throw something out that's working. But it might be that you hadn't considered that there's other structures that are available. Then it's going to move into coaching responsibilities. Key practices in building capacity. And then you've got your resources for that. This piece, as the blueprint gets updated, will continue to grow and may get updated. Some things sometimes might get taken off because we've updated it or it's moved into another resource. Then the next section, it would get into evaluation and start going there. Questions of how that's set up? All right. Oh, here it's talking about evaluation plan considerations. Again, not going to want to repeat what the evaluation blueprint talks about. So we're trying to just get it set up. What's the nitty-gritty that you need to know, and how can we connect you with more information if you need it in those areas? That's what the resources box would share for you. So thinking about where you are in this process now and what you've learned so far about the blueprint, where would you say that you are in this process? How many of you are in the getting ready? How many of you are for getting started? How do you know what I'm talking about? It's tier 1, right? Yes. I realized I forgot to define for you what we're talking about for getting ready, but essentially getting ready for the PBIS framework, starting at tier 1. Yeah. So just keep in mind that through this process, like I said, then at the very end of it, it's going to start going into understanding that implementation logic, understanding that using that data for that continual improvement process, understanding that you're going to move across this dynamic implementation process. And things change, and there's all different priorities that happen that you have to refocus. There are people that retire. There are people that move to a different school. There may be new folks that come in. They're not as familiar with it. So there's always going to be kind of onboarding in this process that occurs. Here's a bigger version of that table that I'd shared with you earlier. I know the font's still small. Don't worry, because you've got it all on the app, and it's on the website already. It's going to remind you, here's the leadership team functions up here, and all of the information that was in there. and what it means going through for getting ready. So here's all of kind of the just takeaways across each bucket. How do you like that when I stand right in the screen? Here. So for leadership teaming here, the function, here are just like quick takeaways. What we're saying needs to happen for the leadership team. Partner engagement, quick takeaways. Funding and alignment, quick takeaways. And it just kind of summarizes it all for you on one table. What's important to know is that we also have evaluation tools. You've probably heard of the TFI. At the district level, we've got the DSFI, which is the District Systems Fidelity Inventory. At the state level, we have the SSFI, which is the State Systems Fidelity Inventory. And those are intended to help guide you in being able to determine what's working, what's not working, and develop an action plan to establish the PBIS framework, regardless of where you're coming from, state, district, or a school. And so just know that that will definitely be talked about in that evaluation section. So the implementation blueprint encompasses all those different areas. When you're thinking about equity, you're thinking about the mental health and well-being, it's going to be talking about that, maybe not in extreme detail, but it's going to help connect you to the other resources for that. And essentially that goal is that you're developing an implementation plan overall to help keep you on track. So this implementation plan is after an action plan has been completed to get things installed essentially on your campus. But then you've got to have a plan for what everybody needs to do across the year overall, and you're using that data for continuous improvement. Questions? Yes?
The previous slide, are those anywhere in particular?
You could click on that link. This actually goes to the Florida site, and this is one of our Florida examples. Yes?
We have plenty of academic kind of screeners, but we don't have social emotional screeners. Are there some on the site?
Yes, if you get into the evaluation section, on there it will talk about how to connect you to the other resources that we have around database decision making, which involve the screening process. Yeah. And if it doesn't, don't worry. We have proposed that we're going to be updating this over the next 5 years. Other questions? All right, so just know that on this implementation journey, regardless of where you are, regardless of where you've been and where you have to like walk back to or make circles around at times, that you are all change agents with this process. It's not going to be an easy process. There are things that you can't control. You can't control if somebody all of a sudden decides, you know what, I want to retire and live the high life. You can't control that, you know, right? But we've got to think about how do we keep going and what is it that we need to do? And that's why we need a team. It can't rely on just 1 or 2 people to do it because it's a lot of work, and besides, it's not very sustainable when it's just a few people. So thinking about what is it that we need to do. Just remember the stakes are high and nobody's exempt in this process. And that's the kind of the one saying that I say that a lot, no one's exempt. In fact, my kids will use that against me too at times because they're like, well, we can't have our phones at the table. I think that should be the same for parents, right? No one is exempt. And it's like, fair, you're absolutely right. We've got to think about if we want behavior to change, the adults are going to need to change. It doesn't mean the adults are behaving badly, but it means the adults are going to have to do something differently. We're going to have to teach the behavior. We're going to have to model the behavior. We're going to have to reinforce the behavior and reteach it and continue to model it. And that's going to be a hard part. But nobody's exempt in that process. It means adults, that's not just the classroom teacher's job to do. It's also the administrator's job to do. All administrators, all cafeteria folks, all bus drivers. Because if we're expecting all of our students to behave a certain way, we need to make sure our adults are too. And if they're not, we need to figure out the supports we need to provide to them so that they can do that. For our families as well. I've seen some of our schools where some family members have come in and they have their MO is they come in and they just start yelling right away. And I was like, is that normal practice here? And they're like, oh, she always does that. These families always do that, whatever. I'm like, but you allow it? I'm like, would that be okay for the kids to do that? Well, of course. Why were the parents yelling? Because their kids were in trouble because the kids were yelling at the teacher. And again, I'm not saying let's blame the parent, but we've got to say, hey, when you step foot, you walk through our door at our school, here's the expectation. I need to teach you of how I need you to communicate. I understand you're frustrated. We're frustrated too. And we teach them and model it and reinforce it. And sometimes we have to delay the conversation until things calm down. So we've got to remember that. No one's exempt. It will be fulfilling. It really will. And we've got to think about, get back to basics. Do what works and do it well. We don't need necessarily to do so much more. Again, go back to what's on your plate and what's not working. Evaluate why is it not working. Maybe we just need to take it off altogether. Be transformative. There are no quick fixes in this process. So if you do think that you go to training or you complete a TFI, that all of a sudden you're going to have magic results, it really doesn't happen. And so we do have teams at times that think very highly of what they've been doing, and they evaluate themselves very highly on one of the fidelity measures, but they're not feeling the results because the practices aren't actually happening. And so we have always got to remember perception and reality in that process. We can still think great things, but we need to have an accurate sense of what's happening in order to be able to improve or to sustain the positive things that are working.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Because that was, I was just thinking, is the person that came in to do the TFI with me, she was rating higher than I wanted to rate because, well, it's there, but it's not effectively there, right?
Are you at a school level or district?
School.
You're at a school. Yeah. Why do you think teachers don't want to score well?
I'm the admin.
So what's your guess on why teachers wouldn't want to score well? Why? Yeah, think about it. That's constantly something we're always reinforcing. Kids, you want to do well. We want to help you with your grades. We're going to celebrate this process. But we know if we continue to say, yay, 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 to a kid who's not reading, not getting the skills and saying, you did it, you did it, you did it. They graduate, they're not reading. They really didn't do it. And so that's that piece we've got to remember. Data is not a scary word and shouldn't be a scary word. Evaluation shouldn't be a scary word. The process with evaluation is that how do we improve? There are things that are working, there are some things that don't work, but let's think realistically what's going on. And I have to say sometimes too that sometimes it's hard for people to self-analyze.
Well,
But it's
the TFI is going to tell us if
there is a rubric, yes.
correctly
Yes.
or not for the PBIS.
But it's scary if there's this end score at the end. And what does that end score mean? And that end score could mean it could affect me in my teacher evaluation. It could impact me in what I want to do for my moving up the ranks. It could impact me for a job, a raise, that type of thing. And so we've got to remember, what do we need to do to go back to help folks understand this is about improving overall. This will help us, but we've got to be honest in the process. The other thing, too, to be fair to folks, is we may see things differently because we're not in the thick of it. So as an administrator, you're not in the classroom all the time, but if the teacher's filling it out, they're like, well, no, I think I'm doing great. I can talk about this about me, but I may not know what the other 20 teachers.
Person came and met with me. It was no teachers were in the process.
And so that's where I would sometimes wonder, what's the motivation for the district person? Again, remember, if you have more schools that are doing great and scoring well, what does that mean for you? Well, if you're the district coordinator of it, you're doing a great job, right? And so that's that piece we've got to understand, that we really want to make sure we are doing the work and we're realizing those successes. And so it's okay. But we've got to be careful sometimes the amount of emphasis we've placed on the outcome for sometimes these scores. And that's why it helps to have a team and to have a team talk through and process it. Because sometimes what I think within my classroom, how things are going, might be a lot different how other people are. You had your hand up?
Yes, I feel like a lot of my work is based around not upsetting people. So administrators don't want to hurt the teachers' feelings by telling them, hey, you're not doing a good job with your classroom management. Administrators don't want to upset the parents because then we could all get in trouble. And now we're trying to dodge lawsuits and Lord knows what else. Meanwhile, the kids and the parents just, they don't have anybody that they don't want to upset.
Yeah.
So it really makes it hard for them to take this stuff seriously. In the meantime, the things that that I see that, like for instance, the PBIS events or, like the toys and the PBIS store, sometimes it feels like that's just not enough for these children because they already coming with cell phones more expensive than us, clothes and shoes more expensive than we have, and they don't have.
So why are we spending the money on the junk then? There's other ways to reinforce people that doesn't cost anything, that doesn't involve something tangible. Think about it. You don't need something from Oriental Trading or the dollar store. You really don't. And ask the kids, hey, what would you like for time? If you were being recognized, what would you like? And they'd say, you know what, I'd love like a music. Can we have music after lunch for 10 minutes? Again, make sure you keep your time, right? Because if you make it too long, then it could be big issues and backfire if you haven't clearly set the expectations up. Sometimes they're saying like, can I just have a break or a pass? Or if it's a high school, hey, could we have like specialized parking recognized at times? I mean, there are ways to do this. And if you go on the website, you might have to hit the search button for it at the National Center, or you can send me an email and I can share with you. There's all kinds of things that are free to reinforce people. Yep. Yeah, we don't need more junk in the world. Right. All right, but great piece. He had brought up, he said, sometimes there's a fear that we can't tell people, give them that critical feedback, that they don't want to hear something negative or bad.
If we get cursed out, like the kids just did us, to make us call a parent in the first place,
Yeah.
where are we going with that?
Yeah, and I think that piece is trying to treat it as a data point. So one of the very first schools, it was 2001, and I flew out to Oregon, and it was one of the model schools that had been working with the University of Oregon and Rob Horner. And I went to the school, and it was creepy middle school in that it was quiet. Yet during lunch, kids were engaged, but at a normal level. And they were respectful with each other. And I was like, okay, this is kind of strange. Because I had just not seen that. I thought, well, maybe it's Oregon and what they put in the fertilizer, I don't know. But what interesting thing about that campus is, and this is the first time I was corrected by students, is I'm walking around and somebody came up and says, hi, are you new here? And I was just like, okay, well, maybe they're just being nice. I said, yeah, I am. And they said, oh, that's great. Welcome to our school. Hey, just want to give you the heads up. The arrow on the top of the walking through the doors means that you need to be on that side when you walk through because the bell's about to ring and you will back us up and we won't be able to get to class on time. And I was like, got it. And but they were correcting me and they were absolutely right. But then I thought, you know what? I bet they said, hey, go up to that lady and talk to her. I had 2 or 3 other students come up to me and say a similar kind of thing. Now, did I get it the first time? No, clearly I was not paying attention and need lots of repetition to make sure I walk on the right side of the hallway through when there's double doors. But kids corrected me. And I heard kids correcting each other like, oh, don't forget. And I mean, it's that piece of like, we've got to think about how are we going to create our community because we're trying to do better. We're trying to make ourselves better. And it doesn't mean we have done something wrong. It means we're giving that feedback. We've got a kid who's struggling with reading or a math problem. We've got to help them get to it. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to go to that next level of math. And I'm not talking about just a class. I'm talking about like the next lesson because it all builds on each other, right? It's that same thing. So if we're able to do it for reading, to say like to help them and talk them through it, why can't we do that for behavior too? If a teacher fills out an office discipline referral form incorrectly or only fills out the name and signs it, and the kid walks in there and there's nothing there, why wouldn't we go meet with that teacher and say, listen, I can't do anything with this information, and here's what I do with this information. That's why it's so important. And so we've got to think about how are we providing performance feedback, not just to kids, but to adults. And it doesn't have to be punitive, and it shouldn't ever be punitive. We're just providing feedback. But it requires patience and deep breaths. Other questions, comments? All right. You'll experience unexpected events. You guys knew that, didn't you? That are both challenging, but there's going to be some that are enlightening. In fact, there may be a lot that are enlightening in this process. Systems change is hard work. One of the unexpected events that was challenging and enlightening for me for the very first time was one of the middle schools I'd been working with in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Every time I showed up at the middle school, this little 6th grader was in his winter coat, backpack on, and standing outside the door. And he would get there and wait until the door unlocked. And then he would go straight down the hall and go into this one room. And so after a couple of days, I'm like, what's going on? That kid, he's always here early. Like, how long is he waiting out here to get into school? And they're like, oh, he's an in-school suspension. Don't worry about him. And I said, so he keeps showing up to school every day to go to in-school suspension? And right away I'm thinking, we need to celebrate. There's something here for the kid. He's coming to school every day, knows he's got, early, still hanging out. He easily could go be finding something else to do, and knows he's got in-school suspension. And I was like, but this has been going on for a long time. They're like, oh yeah, he doesn't get to go back to the class until his mom comes in and meets with us. And I said, do you know if the mom is aware that you need to meet with him? Oh, she knows. We've been sending notes home. I said, have you ever checked his backpack? And they're like, oh, we don't need to worry about that. And I think they were thinking, oh, is there a gun in there or something? It's like, no, check his backpack. Oh, every note that was going home was still in his backpack, crumpled up. He was still going back to school. And I said, what would make you guys think that you're going to penalize a kid? He loses instructional time because his parent can't get here. My guess is she's working a lot, and she's maybe dropped him off, or he's been able to get himself to school. We need to celebrate this, that he's still showing up, knowing he's going to be sitting all day in this wood chair and not being interacted with. And they said, well, it's Louisiana law, Dr. George, that employers cannot penalize an employee for going to deal with their child's discipline issue at their school. So therefore, she has no excuse. And I said, I'm going to look that law up. I'm not quite sure that's how it was interpreted. You've taken it to the next step, where now you're saying he's not going to get instruction because you should be coming here, where she doesn't know she should be coming here. I'm like, guys, you've got a major lawsuit on your hands right there. That kid was back in class like that. So that's the piece we've got to be careful. Are we interpreting things correctly? And how can we look for the nuggets to celebrate? Yeah, he may have been having problems in the classroom that warranted a referral to in-school suspension. But we've got to think about he kept coming to school. He was the first one there. He should be getting perfect attendance. How can we build on that success? Okay? That was, I have some bad examples, like non-examples. Don't do that, okay? But we also have tons of great examples that we learned from you guys out there. Yes?
All due respect, I definitely appreciate that story. But I work at a school in a little town about an hour east of Baton Rouge called New Orleans. And we have parents, so we've said on here that everybody needs to be involved, the community, the parents, the children, the teachers, administration.
It's what we strive for. Doesn't always happen.
Doesn't always happen. We have parents who, we could call and say your son or daughter just cussed out 3 teachers, punched a little girl in the face, is failing every class, skips class quite often, and they say, all right, and then we'll get a call from the parent when we take their cell phone away because it's against the rules.
So it's tricky. So what's happening is not working. And so like I said, I don't have the exact answer for that, but this is that systems change process you guys have to think about. What can we do differently? So if you're calling parents a lot and you're seeing that there's nothing that's coming back, we've got to think about what is it? Why aren't we getting things back? Remember, they're humans too. And so that's where we've seen schools get really creative on. It might take them a year or two, but how do we start to bring their parents in? How do we let them know? I've been one of the parents too of a kid who's got a disability, who's had behavior issues, and I remember getting the calls and every time meeting with the teacher, every single time it was negative. Every time. And when I had to say, I need you, I'm putting my professional hat on here for this one moment, I need you to say something positive about my son before you go into all the negative things that he did today. I need you to do that for me to keep hearing because I'm about to explode emotionally inside. And not that I disagreed or didn't believe what happened, it was the amount of labeling and negativity that was hard for me. And so then it would be like, okay, fine, well, I guess he did this, whatever. Well, it's like, no, and can you try to be a little sincere about it? There's got to be something positive. So you've got to think about, for parents, too, on benefit, how many years have they been getting calls like that? And at some point, like, maybe they don't know what to do. Maybe we haven't been good at saying, how can we problem solve this together? But the fact that our kid keeps coming to school, just being there, we've got to work with something. We've got to start. And I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. It is work. But that's why we got to have a team of people together. But just know if the things you're doing it over and over and over and it's not working, you got to stop and say, why isn't it working? And we've got to try something different. And my hope would be, rather than get more punitive, more aversive, let's say, what is working? That's that, remember, continuous improvement. What is some of the stuff that is working? Well, a lot of the kids that are the most challenging have pretty good attendance, right? That's something you can work with there. Remember, you're on an adventure. All right. Well, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, too, because I went to LSU, so I know that area very well. All right. Build a diverse team that's willing to be adventurous, communicates well. Okay, I was just going to say communicate, but I was like, I really need to. Communicates well, and not communicates well just to the other adults, but communicates well to the students, communicates well to the families, is inspiring to partners. So who are your partners at your setting? Who would you say your partners are? Parents, staff, admin, and your students. Yes, absolutely, be inspiring to them. Again, you don't want a team assembled who are like, here we are on another meeting in the Eeyore approach, and here's what we have to do. And then they get in front of the faculty meeting, okay, so you have to do this. It's not going to be really exciting for folks to want to jump on board. Respects differences, and so just keep that in mind. I have a principal in Orlando. Actually, he moved on up the ranks to the superintendent thing, but this is years ago. And he was asking really difficult questions, great questions, but he was pushing back really hard. He clearly did not, in my opinion, my takeaway was this guy does not want to do this, does not want to come to this training, and who should I say that he should go? Like, this is going to be a bad experience for all of us. And so finally I'd said to him, I'm like, listen, you're asking great questions. You don't have to do this. I don't know what your district is telling you, but I'm just coming in as the trainer. And I don't care whether you're there or not, but I have to tell you, if you are there and you're causing problems, that's not really going to be conducive for everybody else in the learning process who do want to be there. And I said, so I'm okay, respectfully, us saying, nice to meet you, and we'll amicably go away, from each other. It's okay. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, He's like, I need to know all of this stuff because I'm going to commit all my people to it. And if I'm going to commit all my people to it, I need to know the big picture and as much as possible. And I was like, okay, well, that was a nice comeback. Okay. He came to training and he wasn't kidding. And he had 4,500 students at his school. He was not kidding. And he was, at least when he was principal there for a number of years, he was a national exemplar for a high school. He pulled people together. He said to his district, I don't care what you say about the amount of time what we have to do for the credits. They have to have a minimum of 45 minutes each week for us talking about real life situations and how we can improve our character and deal with it. And everybody needs to be on board. And I'm figuring it out. And he turned away from the district. He was like, no, everything has to be academics, everything academics. And he's like, I got way too much fighting that's been happening. Kids do not know how to solve problems. They do not have good relationships with adults. And if we don't put this work up front and keep it going and get somebody, another adult connected to the kids, we've lost them and it doesn't matter. We'll never do well academically as a school. They won't do well out there in life and we're not doing our job then. And I have to say, and so he used to come and present with me years ago here as one of the exemplars. So again, ask the questions, respect the differences, because we learn from each other in that process. Some of us need to see it work first before we get on board, and that's totally fair. And make sure that there's a database action plan that stays alive in that process. Also acknowledge when you have done things well, celebrate it, and get the word out to your partners. Let the kids know. I've heard announcements where people are like, hey, you guys are rocking and rolling. I have not heard, one kid being late to class today. Great job, everyone, for that. Like, that's some feedback right there. Let them know about that. I've heard people, on the announcements saying, hey, parents, thank you for pulling the car up on the right side of the lane and not blocking the school buses. Thank you for parking your car where you're supposed to and not leaving it in the curb and it blocks everybody in the flow. Let them know that performance feedback. Otherwise, what I see happens is in the newsletters, you'll see the same message, same message, same message. And so finally, it's like at some point, we need to start getting more specific. Maybe that's where we need a tier 2 intervention or tier 3, and we need to reach out to the parents directly. Or have, so just think about that. But broadcast your impact. But you're going to have to keep doing the work. All right, you could always follow us on these different social apps, which I realize I should have said follow us on formerly known as Twitter. So getting used to that new change. Do you have any other questions? Yes?
I heard you say a couple times, it shouldn't be punitive, it shouldn't be punitive, and not that I disagree, but anytime I feel like we say that, it turns a lot of people off. And so what would be your
say, be punitive. You got them on board.
it makes people feel good.
Well, I think maybe rather than saying don't be punitive, I think one way we could say is, how can we recognize what's working, what's right, and how can we really emphasize that? And when something is not working, we need to examine why is it not working and what do we need to do differently to prevent. It doesn't mean that we don't have consequences. We still do have consequences for things. But sometimes, like Lucille said, we don't take away kickball. It's that similar thing, like if you're having lots of issues in the cafeteria, you don't stop serving lunch to everybody. We've got to find a better way to address it. So maybe it's the way it's messaged from there. Yeah, because, and again, all fairness, most of us went to school the traditional way. I mean, I went to school just north of here, grew up here in the Chicago area, and we had weekly assembly where you sat on the bleachers and watched whoever was going to get paddled for the week with a broken hockey stick. And that was your warning of how you were supposed to behave. So it is still legal in 23 states. So just remember that. I know, horrifying, right? And imagine that, it was the same kid who got paddled every time too. Question, yes?
Yeah, I have a question. We have in our district low morale in our staff, and
Uh-huh.
For like the PBIS as a whole. Do you think potentially initiating some of those PBIS strategies and maybe
Start with the adults. Absolutely start with the adults. And you're going to need to start with adults, and that's a great piece. So if you've got low morale, for example, that's one of those data pieces. Why is it low? Maybe we need to get people on board. Maybe they're also sick and tired of people constantly telling them what to do, but they're not able to have a voice in what to do. So just as much as you're going to learn over this next 2 days about student voice and the importance of it, which it absolutely is, adults have voice too. You're part of the whole process. And so how do you bring people in? And that might scare people, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to complain like crazy and all of that. But it's like sometimes they need to be heard, but maybe provide some parameters. All right, you got 1 minute to get your stuff out. Now let's figure out how we're going to constructively work through this. Build your vision. If you have a dream for kids of what an ideal student is, why can't you have a dream for what an ideal work environment is? Administrators, think about that. That will keep your teachers at your school. And the longer your teachers are staying at their school and they're happy, families are going to want to send their kids to your school. Not saying it's going to be easy. Yeah. So my contact information is probably not on here. However, if you go to the PBIS.org website, I think you can find it there. And please complete the evaluation. I look forward to seeing you over the next couple days. Thank you for hanging in there in this tight room. And Brian is up.